We've got some incoming Battletech mailbag here. Fritz, build me a tank list. Oh, yes. So one of the great things about Battletech is you can mix and match the units in the narrative. Yes, absolutely. Mechs are the stars of the game. Absolutely. There's never enough battle value because I want mechs, I want air support, I want infantry, I want artillery, I want tanks, I want support vehicles like coolant trucks hosing down my longbows. I want the mobile HQ with the Fritz command center. It's like 20,000 battle value, right? It's just crazy. But with the battle value that you have, you can build an all-tank list. And it can be very, very potent. Make no mistake, it's not a question of this is secondary tech versus battle mechs. You can really bring a lot of pain, a lot of destruction, and literally run, fly, hover over lances like they're nothing. But the challenge, of course, is the Tactica, and I've pushed up vehicles versus mechs. There's a couple of points that you need to be aware of. I'm not going to jump into those points in this vlog. They're up there in the Battletech archive on the channel under the Battletech playlist. We're looking kind of top down, and I'm going to include a couple of secondary units, non-mechs, that really add more potency to the list. So you can decide, do you want to run it very effective or run it really, really effective for the battle value buy-in? And by focusing all tanks, all vehicles, you are going to get maximum use out of the battle value, and you're really going to outnumber the opponent with whatever you take. Outnumber them, which means you will have value in initiative. Even when you lose the initiative, you will have command for most of the game till a lot of your stuff becomes destroyed, for most of the game. And we want to take advantage of that. That's the main thing. If you're running an all tank / vehicle infantry type list, you have the initiative unless you adjust things for house rules. And I'm not saying good or bad, yes or no. We're going stock rules. That is the key. That is the exploit, the battle exploit that we're going to use. So I love playing vehicles, always combined arms, and there are many, many, many times where I will just play vehicles in Battletech. You look at it and you're like, is this some sort of sci-fi tank-based game? There's this scene in one of my favorite movies where Batman is facing off against Superman, and he beats down the Man of Steel, and he laments to Superman, "You're not a god. You were never even a man." From that perspective, you just happen to be born into this universe, arriving at this universe. Anywhere else, you just would have been a normal person, but based on the narrative, you're some god. I love mechs, but that's how mechs are. You got these mech warriors running around, knights of the realm, the highest echelon of society, and certainly mechs are powerful pieces of tech, but the thrill of destroying, exploding mechs with vehicles, the thrill of your infantry, bringing them down, standing heroically on top of them, that's a narrative that's very hard for me to resist, especially being a massive, massive tank enthusiast. Chain of Command, World War II, late Germans, just because I want to play those Tigers. I want to play those King Tigers. I want to play those hunting tanks. Warhammer 40K, the only reason I'm in Space Marines is simply to put down 13 Land Raiders. I mean, I love tanks. I love tanks. Okay, jumping in. That's the enthusiasm. Now let's look at the Tactica. I'm going to talk about vehicles in my collection, and you're going to think about the vehicles in your collection, the roles they can fill, because I'm highlighting specific vehicles, but it's more about the role that they fill. And of course, you'll adjust up and down with battle value. And from that perspective, of course, understanding the roles, you can experiment, swap different vehicles, and kind of grow your collection as it happens. So we start with LRM carriers. And this is going to be some of the more pricier vehicles in the list. I want to have 4 or 6 or maybe 2 if it's a very, very low battle value game. It's going to really depend on the battle value. But I want a nice firebase of LRM carriers. Real time, and this is not an LRM spam list if you've been following my Battletech channel and listening to my playlists. This is just the synergy of tanks and what we're trying to do with them. For the battle value, they're expensive, but it's still a fantastic buy-in. Even if it's just a couple of pieces of sheet metal over a chassis, that's fine. No armor, doesn't need it. LRM carriers in the back, in your deployment zone, reaching out, indirect fire, direct fire. This is going to create a sense of urgency. And you can't just go in with one, because one is like, hey, it's kind of a novelty. And we're not even talking necessarily redundancy. Redundancy is Battletech. Really quick to sidebar, for those of you new to the game, you're trying to, I'm going to simplify it, you're trying to hit, right? You're trying to cause damage. Well, mechs are running around, there's terrain, there's range, you've got different gunnery skills depending on what it is, different weapon profiles. One of the ways you hit is by having multiple shots of the same weapon or the same range band. If I fire off one PPC, I'm probably going to miss. I cook off 3 or 4, 1 or 2 are going to hit. If the dice are legendary, all are going to hit. And there's going to be a sad face for my opponent. So the focus of this tank list is rear supporting fire, not just one, because that's a little novelty. You want to have enough where it creates urgency, where your opponent is like, look, I can't eat real time hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of LRM missiles. You could do the same with artillery. Artillery is a little different with how it operates, where it lands, what phase of the game. That's not to say you can't do it, but the mobility of the LRM carrier, even though they're mostly going to be static, sometimes you have to advance. And for the battle value, that's where we want to go. Direct and indirect fire. That's going to be your fire base. Then we're going to need, so think about that as, let's divide the hex map into three groups, 3 bands, where I deploy on my side, where you deploy on your side, and this kind of midfield middle band. These LRM carriers are going to hang back in my deployment zone and reach out and push out. Then I need elements that are going to move to that midfield band and kind of hang out there. For me, it's a series of demolisher tanks. And again, whether it's 2, 3, or 4, you're going to see. Something that has a big gun, autocannon 20, heavy armor on a turret, so if I get immobilized or have to engage, range is short, but by moving to that midfield, I'm now going to establish an area of control. Think about the hex map. Just randomly think about a hex map. You drop down some tanks in there. Anything that comes into that area of control, either to counterattack or to make it to your LRM carriers or to move for mission objectives, they're going to literally walk into your guns. That's one of the ways that you bring down that battle value. It's one of the ways that you start bringing down mechs. You can't chase them around. Mechs have more maneuverability. You bring them to you. So we're going to have those. I might have some SRM carriers. I say I might. They're usually the last thing to add if I have a ton of battle value, because they hit really, really hard, but they just don't have the armor of a demolisher tank. You could add some, SRM carriers. Did I say LRM? SRM, short-range missile carriers. I might have some of those come up to the center there. Then now we need a group of vehicles that, and this is now where I usually pull in hovers or faster tanks that are basically going to look to run past my opponent, run past them. So as there's these lances that are advancing, well, let's talk about the vehicles first. I'm just getting caught up in the awesomeness of thinking about these tanks that I'm selecting in the massive tank charge, the glorious tank charge on the table. You could go in for the total lulls and do all Savannah Masters. You can do some Pegasus tanks, hovered vehicles. There's a lot of different vehicles, but lower battle value, shorter range, still has some bite, but speed is the most important element. So the way that this is going to work, these 3 groups, and then there's 2 other groups to add. LRMs are going to be in the back, raining down the pain real time. Indirect fire, they're going to be hitting. If you can get direct fire, then that's going to be a type of fury that your opponent is not ready for. Demolishers, maybe SRM carriers moving up to the midfield. Camping, anything that comes into that range to engage or tries to make it to your LRM carriers is going to eat multiple autocannon 20s. A fast-moving list, a fast-moving group Might move up the center of the table, might move the left flank, might move the right flank. You are going to, of course, on the way in, be shooting. You're going to move past the lances, past your opponents. Now, this is where initiative comes in. You're going to have the initiative. So you can activate other pieces. You can activate your LRM carriers, your demolishers, your static pieces. This is before we get into infantry, and we're going to have a little bit of infantry hotness. I mean, the honor on the tabletop and the potential for glory absolutely demands it. You're going to easily bypass them. This third group is going to move past those lances, and you're going to have so many tanks, hovers, vehicles, whatever you want to call it. They're not going to be able to stop them. They're not. So I want to get behind. Now I've caught, just with these three battle groups, I've got the mid group punishing you as you advance. I've got a whole element. We're not talking about like a pesky Jenner or a couple of bug mechs. We're talking like a battle group of tanks that has zipped past you that now is going to be circling around next turn or camping out, waiting to get rear armor, waiting to catch you in the middle. And of course, we've got the LRM carriers. So those are the three groups. Now, group 4 and group 5. Group 4 is going to be tanks that can hit hard. Shrek PPC carriers. Other type of tanks, Ontaros tanks. Tanks that they can't be super slow. We're not taking the Behemoth for the battle value. Behemoth is very, very focused. Very, very specific type tank. But really heavy battle tanks. Rommels. Pattons. Von Luckners. These tanks are going to move up to that midfield. These tanks are going to directly engage your opponent. And what we're doing is we're sending these tanks out. We're engaging. We're hitting them. I mean, multiple PPCs, multiple autocannons, multiple LRM racks, forcing to engage. At the same time, your demolishers, your SRM carriers, they're in that midfield. That is area control. You're preventing the maneuverability of those mechs working well. If they come into range, I'm going to blast them. And they're going to come into range because they need to engage. You've got that element that zipped past. That's now coming back and attacking. And it could be Saladin tanks, by the way. It could be these one-shot wonder type tanks. I zip 4 Saladins past you. You're like, I can't have 4 mobile autocannon 20s. I can't deal with that, but I've got this other wave coming up, and of course the LRM carriers. That's the primary list. For a little bit more battle value buy-in, Karnovs, Warriors, 2 Karnovs with infantry. Drop them in. Either hot drop them or drop them into positions where once your opponent has kind of castled up and sticks together, add the infantry into the mix. Warriors, just to harass, kind of get some rear armor for the battle value buy-in. Very, very cheap. Very, very low. If it was a city fight game, now that's the list kind of, again, specific units that I'm outlining, but you're going to fill in with your collection. The only other adjustment that I would make, if it's city fight, if it's city tech, then I would, that group that's going to zip past your opponent, I still want it. I'll cut it back a little bit to save some battle value. I would invest in APCs and infantry. And certainly you can sprinkle in APCs and infantry. Might do some medium tanks, bulldogs, might do some goblins with infantry support. I want to go a little bit more infantry heavy in the list with transport. Absolutely, you need transport because you're a mechanized list. Because city fight, city tech, taking advantage of those buildings, putting infantry in buildings, just magnifies their survivability, magnifies everything. I mean, swarms of infantry in buildings with SRMs or even LRMs is just crazy. It's just bonkers. It's just madness in there. So I want to take advantage of that, and I need that mobility. So that is the list. And thinking about this, I'm going to drop down there in the info box a link to Death Ray Designs. I have an amazing collection of their miniatures. They have sci-fi, Battletech focused miniatures, vehicles that work in infantry, that work in kind of multiple groups. So they have missile carriers that could easily be an SRM carrier, could easily be an SRM carrier. They've got a number of heavy tanks, medium tanks, and of course, lots and lots of infantry with warriors and transport. So I'm going to drop that down there if you're thinking to boost out your collection. And in that Battletech narrative, in that Battletech universe, again, the duality of I want vehicles, I want infantry, I want artillery, I want mechs. There's just not enough battle value. But at the same time, mechs aren't everywhere. There are a lot of things in the narrative where you just have infantry, you have tanks, and the hype is there, but you can put up more than a fight. You can easily destroy mechs. You can easily take down clanners with a focused vehicle, tank, and infantry list. And that chance for glory, that chance to stand over Superman is just it's amazing. And sometimes it's a little bit too hard to resist.